So how do we move forward in this season of increasing conflict between the house of Saul, who's the previous king losing his seat of power, who's been dethroned but has not yet given up his authority over the control to the kingdom and the castle and the keys to the castle and the military, and the throne of David. So this is about a succession of kings, the season that we're in at the moment, which relates to 2 Samuel. When David had been anointed, he spent a number of years on the run, fleeing from the king that was currently holding the seat of power because of the jealousy of the heirs of the king, who did not want their father to lose the dynasty. But the prophet had already spoken against Saul and condemned him for the sin of idolatry and rebellion, because he was given an order by the prophet Samuel to do certain things. When they went into battle, he was supposed to destroy everything and not bring back any reward, but instead he chose to follow his own path and increase his own glory at the expense of obeying God's direct instruction and following the wisdom of the prophet that had been given to him. And the decree from Samuel was, this sin is like the sin of witchcraft and idolatry, rebellion, partially obeying the order but not completely obeying the order, and idolatry, arrogance, looking at yourself more highly than you ought, and considering your own opinion above the opinion that God had for the condition of his nation. And so the weakness in Saul's character, even though he was a man that was physically, beautiful to look at, and he was powerful in human terms, his character was weak, and it was proven to be that he was unfit to lead God's people, and so he lost the anointing. But before he actually gave up the throne and was taken away from the headship of Israel and Jerusalem, Judah, there was a battle that went on for about 7 years between David, who'd been anointed and then started to rule over a small part of the kingdom, and then eventually the whole kingdom. So there was a struggle that endured for about 7 years and 6 months when David was ruling in Hebron, and he faced constant attacks and lots of plots and ploys for him that caused difficulties, people murdered, etc. But ultimately the anointing had gone from Saul, and it didn't matter what he did. In the long run, it made no difference, because the prophet had turned his back on him, and in fact he never went back to see Saul, never spoke to him again. Once David had been anointed as king, chosen and anointed and then appointed, the prophet never ever spoke to the previous king ever again. His fate was sealed. And even in the last battle before Saul dies, when he knows that he's about to die, he calls the witches of Endor to bring Samuel the prophet back from the dead to speak to him. And the prophet comes back from the dead when he's encountered by the witches and says to Saul, "Why are you calling me back? It's too late. The word has been passed about you, and you're going to die this day, and your sons will also die." And so that's exactly what happened. Saul had lost the favor of God on him, and David had been chosen, anointed, but he spent 7 years and 6 months waiting in Hebron, ruling over only a small part of God's kingdom before he was able to reunite the entire group of the 12 tribes under one kingship. So there was a battle that went on. And so I asked Jesus, how do we proceed in these days where there's a conflict ensuing for the throne? He says to me, carefully, with more wisdom and less excesses and fewer people and short style writing, not divulging too many details, but just enough to keep them guessing what's coming. I say, okay. And then I hear, she'll be the one I can trust. I can see who you are, my queen, on the ground, incognito, on the street, undercover and alone all the time. She's very wise. I like her, my beautiful woman of God. She's a real one, nothing fake, so rare. You're like a diamond, Amazon jungle diamond. I'm going to find you in the city, my darling woman, hiding out with this little bird under your back like Noah. She's a keeper, and I'm going to love this one properly. I know I will now. Down the rabbit hole, Alice.